Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Indoor Hunter, and we're back with another video game discussion. Today, I am actually joined by my good friend RHINO, and we're not going to talk too much in detail about games per se, but we're going to talk more about gaming in general, what it means to us. As a little backstory, RHINO, I won't give out too much information, but to make this conversation a little clearer for everybody, RHINO's 21 years older than I am. And so I'd kind of like to talk to RHINO here about what gaming means to him in his generation versus my generation. So, for example, RHINO, introduce yourself. Say hello. Hello to the world.
Hello, everybody. Rhino here, as introduced. Um, what does gaming mean to me? Gaming for me is an outlet to mostly relieve the stress of the day-to-day grind that I do with my job.
And I think that's kind of what most people do when they game. Now, something I kind of wanted to discuss a little different. So, and again, this isn't throwing shade. This is just a reality situation. You're roughly the same age as my parents, and
Ouch.
that generation, I feel like, and again, I kind of grew up in this environment where gaming was never seen as nothing more than something a child would do. I can, I remember everyone from that era saying, oh, it's a waste of time. Uh, Gamers are lazy. That there was that cliche of the gamer living in his mother's basement, eating Cheetos and doing nothing with their life. So, what are your views on that? Did you have those same type of views or outlooks?
I, being of that age group, I certainly looked at gamers in a different light in the sense that they weren't all that social. Um, 20 years ago is to give you a bit of background on me. I grew up in northern remote Canada, where neighbors were, several miles down the road. I grew up on a farm. Uh, we were more responsible for doing chores than anything else. In fact, my family didn't even own a TV or a VCR back then. We had a TV and a VCR that was shared by three or four families, and it just rotated month to month between the families. So every 3 or 4 months, we'd get a TV and a VCR for a month, and my parents would, let us rent a bunch of movies for a week or so, and we watched the movies sort of one a night. But that was once every 4 months. So going back to the question of what's it like for my generation, my age group, and looking at gamers. So a lot of my friends um, actually do game. We're all about the same age, and some of my friends don't game because they still have that lookout saying or that outlook of saying, why do you game? Isn't it just a waste of time? It's something that I enjoy. Like I said, I feel it takes the stress out of the daily grind. Um, my job that I currently am employed in is with the military, so I'm dealing with people all the time, and this is my chance to get away from people and not have to deal with the day-to-day problems that people bring to the table. My wife has learned to understand why I game. Um, she's also in the military. Um, she understands. We've had many discussions about it, but my wife certainly understands it a lot better now. I tend to be more relaxed after playing some games. Um, I tend to be a lot more calm when I sometimes when I come home from work. I'm pretty fired up from the day. There's a lot of issues that I deal with in a day, and when I come home, we have our chance to sit down and chit chat about the day, and we'll make supper. We'll relax for a little bit, and then I'll say I'm going downstairs. And she understands that when I say that, it's not to get away from her. It's just to let me go into my place where I can relax. So that's that kind of just the broad strokes. That's how I look at it. I look at it as a stress relief. My generation, I would say 50-50. look at it as some sort of a stress relief, and the other half saying they just don't understand it because they haven't been involved in it as
And
much.
that is something that has interested me because I've met so many people of your age group and even from mine, but they just don't understand gaming itself or gamers themselves. And I can understand, 25 years ago where there was no over the internet gameplay to where the only way there was just single player games, and if you played multiplayer games, it was with whoever's with you in the room at the time. And somewhere along the timeline, gaming became a cultural shift that I still think a lot of people just don't quite understand. Those that aren't in the world, those of your generation, just don't quite grasp. Um, and I think for anybody that hasn't seen it yet, my video game discussion on Halo kind of touches on this. I think in the early 2000s there was a cultural shift from video games are for lazy people. They don't mean anything. They're nothing more than a child's toy. And honestly, if you think about it, Nintendo kind of still has this train of thought. That's a different discussion for a different time. I digress. But there's early 2000s. There was this kind of cultural shift. And I remember it because I lived through it and I was there and experienced it. Was Halo 2 when it came out? Rhino, I know you're not new to gaming per se, but you weren't on that bandwagon at the time. We're talking. Oh, when did Halo 2 come out? I think it was 2004, 2005 ish. Let me Google that real quick. But I can remember. Okay.
While you're Googling that, I'll just jump in here real quick. My first console, uh, oh God, was it the Atari?
Yep.
No, that's a computer.
Yep.
I think it was
So
the Nintendo 64.
sorry to interrupt.
Now, I'm dating myself a little bit when I say
Huh.
that,
That
and that would have
is.
been
Go ahead. Sorry.
1999-ish, 98, 99-ish. And I remember playing that James Bond GoldenEye, and we had it split up into four screens. And that summer that I really got into that game, I was at one of the Canadian Forces training bases, and a couple of my fellow instructors saw that I had this and said, can you play more than one person? And I had no idea what the hell they were talking about until one of the I'll call them nerds, and I don't mean to be disparaging when I say that. One of the nerds said, "Yeah, you can just go to the multiplayer setting," and he had to show me where it was. And we ended up, setting up this big bed sheet and having a projector and hook up the N64 to the projector, and we played for hours to the point where we're using the classrooms that we're teaching our students in at night to have these James Bond GoldenEye evenings. Each have a six-pack of beer or something like that, and just play and have a great time doing it. Then after that, I guess the real computer games, I guess you can call them, was things like Age of Empires or Age of Civilizations. I can't remember. It was all single player games. But that's my first real introduction, hardcore introduction, I call it, into gaming, was the N64 with James Bond GoldenEye. There was a few. I played racing games and stuff like that, and I played a few more games when I went into college. But yeah, N64 with James Bond GoldenEye was my first real introduction to gaming.
What I think is interesting, again, to age ourselves here, I was a child at this time. Ryan was talking about going to college, but what's interesting is a lot of people, talk about like, oh, I was gaming on the Atari. I don't know if you really were though, because back then, again, discussion for a different time. We've got the Nintendo, we've got the Super Nintendo, we've got the Nintendo 64, and for a lot of people, my generation, I know you say it for clout. Oh, well, I started on the Super Nintendo. You probably didn't. You probably started like everybody else, just like Rhino here, on the Nintendo 64, which was pretty groundbreaking at the time when it came out. It came out, it was 95 or 96, and GoldenEye was what started. Technically, the gaming console that I started on was the Sega Genesis. We're talking Sonic. We're talking. Uh, there was like a Jurassic Park game on there, but these weren't very immersive experiences. These are very arcade style. These are the kind of games you would find like at a movie theater and put a quarter in and play, right? The Nintendo 64 changed all of that. GoldenEye changed all of that. And same for me, that's when gaming became a social experience instead of just you're alone in your house and you're playing by yourself and everybody thinks you're weird because you're staying in your room. Fast forward 2004 when Halo 2 came out, I still very vividly remember this. Seeing on the news thousands of people lined up waiting the release for Halo to come out. Again, I say this frequently for older games. Back in those days, folks, you had to go and buy your games. Had to. Like, there was no online digital stores. There was none of that. And so...
Well, this is still when
yes.
video stores were in existence, and that's a sign of the times. Is that, you know, we're moving towards the virtual shopping of
Yep.
anything and everything. So I think you bring up a good point there. It all depends on your exposure to the systems that were in place at the time. Younger folk nowadays are going to be used to seeing things like a virtual shopping space to buy these games. I've got Xbox disc games.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at them right now. I used to have a lot more, but I got rid of them because I didn't play them that much. But yeah, I think the point is very, it's a poignant thing to speak, is that, you know, there was a different mode of getting games.
And, you know, and that kind of added to the experience itself. Again, because, you know, you had like Star Wars and things like that, you know, where people get together, but it was different because nobody in the mainstream, I should say, understood gaming and what it meant and why these people, for, again, going back to my story, I remember watching on the news the release, or the day after the release of Halo 2.
My first experience with Halo was with you and Pumpkin.
Yeah, but let me finish the story real quick, Ronald. There, no, I'm just kidding. But kind of again with that cultural shift, your generation versus my generation, there were, like I was saying, thousands of people lined up out these stores. And I remember the news anchor saying, you know, I just don't understand, like, oh, look at everybody that came out of their mom's basement. Ha 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 ha. 5 years later, you're looking at a multi-billion-dollar industry that the world is no longer laughing at. I mean, video games have now are kind of mainstream life, and those that are still clinging on to the it's your mom's basement. Those are very old ways of thinking. I mean, we're talking NFL, MLB, hockey, soccer, all of it. It's highly integrated with sports. Reality. I mean, it's just it is the next big thing, and I think this is because, as far as like a entertainment system, and I say that as more of like a mode of entertainment, you know. So let's say when you were 15 years old, Rhino, what was your version of entertainment? You know, you had what, the arcade, movie theaters.
So yeah, I was going to bring that up when you spoke about the arcade games. That was the big entertainment, and that was actually a huge social circle in arcades. Um, there's similarities during my heyday when I was 15, I'll call it. Um, you know, there was a couple of games that were really popular, and there's always that one guy that was top of the ladder, if you will. You know, fast forward 30, 40 years, you've got people who are top of the ladder for the online gaming community, and they're no different. It's the same thing. You know, you pick any personality that's big on the
Well,
online game system, and
I I would I would say what's different now though is instead of having your name on a leaderboard, today you make $100 million.
yeah, It was all for bragging rights in the
Um,
arcades. That was it.
you know, exactly. And in today's world, I mean, you literally can make tens of millions of dollars. You can fill arenas
Yeah.
from video games. And so I've always been curious to see. Again, you were kind of in that world a little bit, but not really. But I wanted to kind of give my thoughts on it to those people that still have that kind of begrudging, like they look down on gaming and gaming itself. And what gaming means to me is, especially with online gaming, that changed the world. It did. I'm not sure when or where historians will either say, yeah, online video gaming changed the world. I think they're going to someday, because it allowed, and again, this is my opinion, the way I see it, it allowed people to travel the world cheaper, easier, faster than any other method. Now, you're not physically going, like, so for example, I live in the United States, RHINO here lives in Canada. We don't have to go to Canada or the United States to hang out. We're here together right now. And we might as well be in each other's basements, you know what I mean? And I think that to me is what makes people just don't get it. I've talked to people from all around the world. Name a country, I've probably talked to them.
You bring up a really good point. Um, Flashback, I don't know, when we first met online, we were playing, I think it was World of Tanks. And I just happened to be jumping into a lobby, and I think you and Pumpkin were teaming up, and or somebody was teaming up, I can't remember. But I recall chit chatting with you guys, and you guys were, were miles ahead of me in the game, and I was like, I took it for having fun. And then as time went on, we kind of came on more often. We became online friends, and had that connection. Now, how I don't remember how long ago it was. Do you? 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, honestly, I could legitimately find that out. But if I had
Okay.
to guess just based off memory, I would say it's probably 4 years ago,
My
give or
first
take.
online, like truly online game, was World of Tanks, and I was working in Western Canada, and one of my young coworkers said, "Yeah, I can set you up for working for playing online." I was really afraid because I didn't know there was all these things, we'll call it 10 years ago, of these people who were, creeps. I'll just call them creeps that were playing online games, and I didn't want to have that stigma attached to me as a human being. Um, until I got onto World of Tanks and kind of figured out, and I was very leery of doing it. But like I said, once we got in there, and once I made a few friends, you and Pumpkin and Black Cat, um, it was a hugely different experience because it wasn't just putting a disc in and playing single player where I, literally am in my basement, and I'll say it, I was being a nerd because I was just playing these games by myself. Speaking with people around the world, I was talking regularly with people from New Zealand and Australia, of course, the United States. There was a couple people in Europe, but I think people tend to mostly stick to their own regional servers. But I
Yeah,
like the idea that I can jump on there and there's people literally from every walk of life.
and I
Uh,
think as games modernize, it does become a little bit harder to talk to people around the world, because as technology advances, we've learned, like, hey, it's a lot easier to keep people closer to home. That way, like, your internet connection's better and whatnot. But
yeah.
with services like VPNs and stuff like that, there's people people go through the cracks. In some games, they don't really have those barriers. Um, I literally, like, all walks of life, and that to me too is very interesting. Like gaming, um, there's no real barrier to entry. You don't
I
have
was
to
I
be
was going to use the
rich.
same word. There's no barriers. There's not. And all you hear is a voice, and unless you have the camera set up where you can see them, which might be more difficult, I don't know. Um, it's that voice that you just hear in the headphones.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've never laid eyes on you. I don't think you
Right.
laid eyes on me. At some point it would be great to actually link up in person and have that face that connects to the voice. Um, but we've created this relationship over this voice. That's all you hear is the
Yep.
voice. You don't see anything other than what you see on the screen of your TV or your monitor.
Well,
Um,
and not only that though, and again, the people that aren't into gaming probably won't understand this because video games are so immersive that you experience things together.
yeah,
And whenever humans experience things together, they obviously naturally bond. And whether it's a tough game that you played or a really good game, you're like, man, that was fun as shit. That's that bonding experience that nothing really holds to. I mean, yes, there was, you could say to your coworker, like, oh, did you see that movie that just came out? It's pretty good, wasn't it? And it's like, yeah, man. But that's where that kind of ends. Where with video games now, you can say, man, there's this new gun that just came out. Man, we got to try it out, and then, man, it was so good. And like, and it's a continuity of
I think
just,
it also really has to go back to the shared interests. Everybody in my job, when I'm at the job, you're just talking job speak or
mm-hmm.
job talk or whatever you want to call it. Um, I think when we get into this online gaming in this online world, it changes from everything that you know in your real life world because there's no barriers to people talking with each other. I think that subconsciously transfers over to no barriers within good reason for just having conversation. How many times have we talked about camping or hunting for real or just what's going on in the world. I find I have more grounded conversations because I don't know you as a human being. I know you as a voice and I know you as a character on the screen, but I know if I have something to talk about, there's easily a way to introduce into the conversation because I don't have those barriers to worry about.
And I think, again, talking about those barriers and stuff, again, gaming can potentially, I think, unify the world in a way that nothing else can. We're talking the Olympics here just every single day in your home. Uh, for example, I've talked to doctors, lawyers, police officers, military personnel, government officials, school bus drivers, teachers, professors. I mean, there is no barrier to that, and so you really get a good perspective of people, the world. Um, you can. I've just never really experienced that before because I think the only other way to really experience that is to actually travel to those places. And obviously, especially with like COVID now, you obviously can't go and travel to Russia. You hear all the time, oh, the Russians are bad and all this stuff, but when you talk to them online, they seem pretty damn cool. And vice versa, say, hey, Americans are bad guys, but then you talk to them online, you're like, oh shit, you're pretty cool. You're just like me. We have the same interests, same hobbies, and then you realize the people are really the same across the spectrum. And
Absolutely. I think, again, you're hitting on all the really important points. Human beings in general are very easy to get along with. It's the people who cause problems that are some people who may not be connected in the same way that others are, or maybe even the majority are. I don't know. Um, but overall, I think that when you talk to someone from another country online, there's a shared interest there, which kind of puts you on the same level and the same,
mm-hmm.
not the same playing field, but it's the same level,
Yep.
and it just gives you that air of innocence to say, "Hey, man, what's going on in your country?" it sparks it opens the door for conversation, and there's no bias, there's no preconceived um, notions of what that person's going to be like, because that person is doing the same thing you are by reaching out and just saying, hey, listen, do you want to team up in this game? Yeah, sure. Hey, my name's so and so, my name's so and so. And as you're playing, you kind of realize who that person is for real versus having a preconceived bias from the news, or from how you were raised or whatever. It's just, there's that commonality there, which I think really puts everyone on the same level.
Well, and something else too, and with actually talking to people around the world, it's not like social media, like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of those things. I feel like online gaming, to a certain extent, is true free speech in the sense that, let's say you live in Russia or you live in China, and you may have certain opinions you're not allowed to voice publicly, whereas online you can just say, hey man, like, I don't agree with this or don't like that, or and that's just really interesting to me.
Yeah, 100%, 100% agree with you. Absolutely.
And you know again, the freedom aspect of it, again, you can just share these ideas, and it's just a great place that I don't think people that don't game understand at all. And even for like the United States level, I mean, the United States is so big. I mean, people that social media like Facebook or
Culturally, it's
Twitter or
different in New York
Instagram or
than it
any of those
is,
things.
in Washington State
I
or
feel like
Texas,
online gaming,
you know what I mean? So it
to a
kind of
certain
just
extent, is true free speech in the sense
really get a
that,
feel
let's
for
say
how
you
everyone
live in
is,
Russia or you
acts,
live in
feels,
China.
talks, and again, like that's what's so interesting to me. You kind of realize, like, man, deep down,
it I feel like in some ways gaming really breaks that barrier of what you put out there on your social media versus who you really are.
I think for me, social media is still a gray area for me. I'm on Facebook. I don't have Twitter. I don't have. That's all I have. I have Facebook, and that's it. My wife has. Is it Twitter? Twitter. She has Facebook, and I think she's got something else. I don't know what it is, but she she
Boomer.
she uses it for the communities that she belongs to. She loves to show our dogs. So she's away right now. She's doing a dog show, and she that's how she not deals with it, but that's how she expresses it. Um, but the people that she deals with, on social media, again, much like we are here with gaming, it's a like-minded community, and there's a lot of sharing going on there with how they do, or how they prepare, or what they did, or what they could have done. There's a lot of sharing in that respect. It's very collaborative, and I'm not saying what we're doing here isn't
Well, and
collaborative,
talk
but that's from a social media perspective. I think,
more as a you see it more as like a business
yeah,
aspect than a
exactly,
social
exactly. It's a good way to
aspect.
put it.
And I think that's always how it's meant to have been. Again, I don't know. That's again, social media is a completely different topic and discussion, but it does kind of fold into going back to what you were saying about community. I I would I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say the video game world may be the largest community out there. I mean, for example, Warzone is one of the most, if not the most popular online game. I know there's things like Dota and WoW and stuff, but when you have a game that has nearly 100 million consecutive players, that means something. That means there's 100 million human beings that all can relate on one thing, can talk about this thing, and experience this thing. And I think that's what makes it. I personally, now that I've started uploading to YouTube and Twitch and these types of things, I never, growing up, I still had that kind of mindset when Twitch came out and YouTube and all that stuff. I had the boomer mentality. It's like, Why would anybody want to watch someone play a game? I'll just go play the game myself. But as that community builds, you kind of get that sense of, oh, that guy's playing the game that I like. And then you know those experiences those people are going through, and you kind of bond through them, in that method. So, like, you're watching somebody like, Dr. Disrespect or Tim the Tatman or Nick Merckx, and you see those guys, they're at the top of the level, but then you realize, like, oh, things that are happening, they're the same thing that happened to me in the game, and then you realize, like, okay, we're all kind of similar in that sense, and there's really not that big of that gap. I mean, there's skill level and all that stuff, but those experiences are still very, very similar, and I think that's just really cool. Whereas you watch somebody in a movie like Brad Pitt, you have no idea what it's like being in a movie for the most part. Most people. We're talking general here. Whereas you watch somebody that's big time in gaming, you 100% understand the situation that they're in.
Yeah, you bring up the YouTube subject. When I have no idea when Twitch came on. I didn't know about Twitch until I got into gaming. I followed a couple people in different
Boomer
games,
alert.
and then one of them started talking about Twitch. I'm like, what the hell is this Twitch thing? It took me a while to figure out what the hell it was. In fact, I think I asked you how I get into Twitch. I used YouTube mostly for the educational aspect and for the, do-it-yourself things. But as I got more into gaming, I started watching more YouTube specifics on different games, different ways of tackling a problem in the game, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at my YouTube feed now, it is 90% nerd gaming stuff, and I love it. My wife, the other 10% is her. She does crochet, she does dog shows, she does all this stuff. So the other 10% is her stuff that she's looking up for educational things. There's still so much out there that I don't know because I'm a little bit older and I'm coming into the game a little bit later. I call it, making up for lost time. But the more, it's a constant barrage of information that's helping keep my mind young. My body may be getting a little older and slower. I just broke my ankle playing golf on Wednesday. That tells you right there how what the situation is. But yeah, but I'm learning more. My personal mantra is I have to learn something new every day. And every day that I go onto YouTube, I find something new. But that's not my tick in the box learning something new. I just find YouTube is really handy for a myriad of different things. But right now, it's kind of focused on, okay, I need to research something on XYZ from this game or whatever. And I find YouTube is a really good way to go into it. And just kind of gather those little bits of information, those little nuggets that I can put in the back of my brain. So when I go in to play the game, oh yeah, it was this. And I can, change my game style just ever so slightly.
And again, that's something that myself, again, because I was the same way as you were with Twitch, especially. Like, I just never understood, like, why would someone want to watch someone else play a game? But then you realize, like, okay, so this like Nick Merckx, for example. No offense to the Tatman. He's very good at the game. And so you watch someone like him, and then you kind of watch how he plays. Take the entertainment out of it. You watch how he plays, and then you start implementing that into your own gameplay, and then you start to see, like, minor improvements. And you're like, okay. Then you kind of understand, like, okay, these guys are really good at the game. Maybe I should play more like them. Now, there could be an argument said that this era of these giant Twitch streamers and streamers in general, we're talking, Facebook, YouTube, all of it, in some sense has degraded gaming in a way. It's kind of forced the way people play, the meta style gameplay. Good or bad, I don't know. I mean, I could see both aspects of how that's good and bad. Because you really, it's hard in today's era of gaming to be just a casual gamer. Um, it's hard if like for Warzone, for example, it's not a hardcore game by any means, but if you want to win and be good at it, you can't just jump on once in a while and say, "Yeah, I'll have fun," because you're just going to get smashed. And it forces, I think, everybody into a mindset they have to be good at the game in order to have fun with it, which is obviously not true at all. I mean, we're terrible at the game, but we're still playing every night. But again, going back to that experience, you could be having a shit time. I liken it to having a beer with your buddies at a bar. You're just there for hanging out. At least that's
Yep.
that's how I look at it. I don't care about the
Yep.
game. It's cool if we win, but it's more for the experience of like, all right, let's see how Rhino's day was, or what happened with Rhino that was crazy. I.e., he breaks his ankle playing golf. Like, I don't even know how you do that. But full
I,
sent that shit, huh?
I definitely agree that it's. I was talking to my wife a couple months back. I think it may have just been during the Christmas break. I read an article. I still read. I still actually read. Um, I read an article. There was a guy who, very much like myself, he's an older guy, um, lived a pretty hectic life, was doing some pretty crazy things, and got into gaming. And his wife was one of those people who says, "Why are you gaming? Like, what are you doing wasting your time?" And he says, "Listen, sweetheart, I'm not out causing trouble. I'm not going to get arrested. I'm not running around with, doing hookers and blow. Like it's I'm safe. I'm in my home. You know where I am. I'm not spending any money, you know." And in this article, the wife kind of took a step back, realized what the husband was saying by saying, "You know what? That's a good point. He's more relaxed. He's more calm. He's not running around doing silly things outside in the world." And when
And that's what it is for me on game. And just like I'll caveat what I'm getting ready to say with just like anything else, there can be too much. I mean, there is obviously video game addiction out there to where people take it a little too far. They lose their job or they fail out of school because of gaming. That happens. But again, with drugs and alcohol, same thing happens, right? Um, but unlike the drugs and alcohol, I say that like alcohol's not a drug, but
I'm gonna crack a beer now.
whenever you're in your home and you're just, for me, that entertainment experience is just better than going out and seeing a movie or going to the bar. And again, this, like you were saying, like from the older generations looking into gaming, saying, "Oh, they're just antisocial." Again, I disagree. Like I said, I've talked to thousands of people across the world. You know what I mean, from all walks of life. So I disagree with that aspect. But um, I agree with you. That's kind of my argument. Like nothing drives me more insane when somebody's like, "Oh, you're just that's a shame. You're just a gamer." Meanwhile, they'll sit there and watch, the Kardashians for
Yeah,
12
it's a
hours
matter of
straight. It's like, well, you're not even. Yeah.
perspective, right? It's a matter of perspective. If I like being in the military for so long and being in a leadership role, I've had to be an instructor more times than I can count. Um, Imparting my knowledge of things onto others um, is the critical function of being an instructor. So when nowadays, and I'm talking in the last 2 or 3 years maybe, when I'm talking to somebody about gaming, I'll put it back on them much in the way that you just said, in that, okay, if you think I'm sitting there not talking to people, not being social, I may not be physically social, but I am interacting with other people. I'm, finding out a little bit about what their country is like or what their
Mm-hmm.
town is like or what their province or state is like. I get my feedback from them instantaneously, but I'm doing it from one place literally across the world. So that's been my message going back from an instructor perspective of being able to impart knowledge and information, but also receiving it and still having that social that social aspect. Yes, when I go to work, we have coffee breaks and we'll sit down, we'll talk about what's going on in the NHL or whatever. Um, of course, COVID hasn't helped that. But before COVID, there was still the military is a very social organization in that you're interacting with people. Um, so you can still have those conversations. It's just that I continue that when I go back home or when I come home and I jump online. I'm not only talking to you, but I'm talking to Scarecrow. I'm talking to Black Cat. I'm talking to other people in other games around the world when I'm waiting for you or you're waiting for me. There's an opportunity to learn more about the world that we live in. It's a small planet. I mean, we think it's huge because we have to ride, a bicycle or for an hour to get somewhere, or drive for 3 hours to get somewhere. We think that's a long distance. We're a speck of dust in the universe, and we're so small that there's no reason why I can't talk to someone around on the other side of the world and find out what's going on in New Zealand.
Well, and again, going back to how gaming kind of can unite the world. Again, with the touch of a button, you're instantly connected to tens of thousands of people across the entire planet.
They're in the white building.
That's what makes it so great. I understand I'm going to sound like those people that look down on gaming, but I kind of have the same opinion on those people that do just watch TV all day and that's all they do. I think where that differs, and I understand, if you do your hobby, do what you like to do. I get it. But with gaming, again, this is for those of you who disagree with gaming or don't like gaming. Now, are you going to be watching this and you don't like gaming? Probably not.
Enemy UAV
But, if somebody hears this and they want to say, see, this guy gets it, this is why I like the game. If you have parents that are just like, oh, why are you gaming all the time? Or if you have, a significant where I think gaming and soaking in a movie or Netflix shows or network TV, anything like that, is you're actively engaging your brain the entire time you're playing a game. You're having to do deductive reasoning.
No.
I mean, you're having to problem solve constantly. It's not just no, you're either on or you're not. More so in a competitive style game, like a shooter or something like that. But even just like a basic, side scroller, you've got to think about your next move, or man, I didn't beat that, and so you're constantly engaged. And I think that's where it's completely different than other forms of entertainment. I would honestly say playing video games is very similar to reading like a novel. Reading a novel, you engage your brain, you have to use visioning, you're immersing yourself in the world.
Enemy attack chopper is in the AO. Bring it down and recover the
A good game, in my opinion, is a game that can immerse you to that level, like a book can. And it's really insane. A video game, in my opinion, is like
sense.
a playable book. If that makes
Bring
sense.
up the point of addiction. It also goes down to time management. Oh, I downed him. I mean, there's, I have my hobbies. I still, well, my hobby right now is camping with my wife in my fifth wheel. It's not really camping, but that's just what we're calling it. That's another stress relief for me, is just to get away from everybody and go to somewhere where it's quiet. You know what? I'm an active sport shooter when I'm not breaking my ankle. So I do like to go to the range. I call that brass therapy. There's a few other things that I like to do here and there, but it's about time management. I'll say if you don't have a life, quote unquote, and all you do is work and then come home and play video games, that's not really effective time management, in my opinion. That's you're really climbing down that rabbit hole of addiction. Right. Like, I have to get on the game, and I have to do this. But if you spread your time out, like you went camping with some friends, and you were offline for a few days there, and I'm sure when you came back from that, you were very refreshed and you felt really good. Just like every weekend when I go to the campsite to go to the fifth wheel,
and
I just disconnect from everything. Like, I barely even look at my phone.
And that's healthy for anything in general. I mean, again, this is, those people that look down on gaming, addicted to video games. Well, it's like, Again,
Yep,
Sally.
yep. And I got no
Karen,
fucking. I got.
Pain
You
is
just watched the
temporary.
I
Kardashians
got
for
sniper rifles
12
only.
hours
That's all I
straight.
got.
Okay, let's chill it a little bit. Okay, but again, there are people like
I'm
that,
under fire.
that's
You're
all
still
they
in
do
this.
all day, every day, and unless you're making money at it, you probably shouldn't be doing that.
Ignorance is bliss, right?
I understand
Still
everybody needs
here.
entertainment.
Still standing.
Whereas some people play and obviously fall into the latter category of that.
Dude, I gotta bail.
So
I gotta
everybody
bail.
needs their kind of entertainment tiers in the world, and that is what video games are to a lot of people.
I got nothing. I got
Millions
nothing.
of people. That is their release. And I think now, though, we're finally in an era where, I mean, it still exists. The stigma of the Cheeto eating lazy gamer, but I mean, when you look at Twitch, there's not too many of that going on. There's not.
Online gaming has turned into a real business, like a real
It has.
bona fide business, and that's something. If I had to sum up the conversation, that's something that I wasn't exposed to until much later in life, just simply because of when I was born.
It's a risk you take,
I look
man.
at today's generation now, going, these people have so much. The world is going so fast.
And hell, I'm gone from anywhere.
I just don't
so I'm gonna
have-
to come to you.
I can't keep up with it. I just have to, struggle as hard as I can to keep up with everybody else in terms of technology. But it's moving so fast. How many questions have I asked you of how to do something on the Xbox?
Well, and to kind of touch on that, in hindsight, I look back, and if my own parents had the same attitude as my parents today,
Eyes on shooter.
I'm not saying I'd be rich and famous, but I could have used my actual skills in gaming to go somewhere, to follow a different path. And I'm not saying, folks, quit your
Hostile
day
dropping
job
into
and
the
become
area.
I can hear him shooting,
full-time.
and you get it first.
However, if
Still here. Still
what
standing.
it takes, I mean, go get in a
I
tournament.
just what you just said sparked a memory. So there was a cartoon, what cartoon on TV? I think that was like a newspaper cartoon that went on for years. For the life of me, I can't remember what it was. Oh, The Far Side. I don't know if you've heard The Far Side before or not.
Yep. Gary Larson.
One of the comics, or one of the little comics within The Far Side was, there was advertisements in a comic newspaper saying, "Oh, we need a gamer to do this, and the salary is this, and you can, you'll car included, and blah blah blah." I don't remember how long ago that was.
Basically, what you're saying.
Basically, making fun of gamers, saying, "Oh, you'll never make a living gaming," is how I understood that.
Showed them, Ma.
And strangely enough, and strangely enough, I would say it's probably 20 years ago. But that was when the time I was just getting the James Bond GoldenEye of saying, wouldn't it be cool if you could actually make money doing this?
Again, going back to that mindset of can't make anything of it, and there are literally professional gamers that make more money than some professional athletes, and
100%.
again, the older generations may not understand that, but it's a skill set, just like being good at football. Being good at a game is this, because there's a difference between when we're all gaming, you're like, oh yeah, so and so's the best at this. Where there's levels, right? There's layers. Like there's good, and then there's the best, and you have to be the best if you want to make money, and that's where that barrier to entry really is like you have to be really good. So that's why I said earlier, if you are really good and you think you've got what it takes, go join a tourney, start that process, and if you've got kids that are good at games, maybe some of the best gamers in the world, that's exactly how they started out. Their parents saw that they were good at the game. They kind of pushed them in that direction, encouraged that. And I know that sounds strange. I'm not saying don't keep your kids from sports, but if you notice your kids are really good at games, you're like, man, especially if you yourself are a gamer and has kids and you notice, hey, man, my 5-year-old kicks my ass. That's kind of bad. Kind of nudge them in that direction because someday you never know. They could be the next big,
You never know.
superstar. I mean, literally just recently, FaZe Clan was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. That's huge. We're talking Sports Illustrated, the magazine. A pro gaming team on the cover of Sports Illustrated. If that doesn't show that the culture's changing, I don't know what will or what does.
The world is changing so fast. Whatever industry you work in, whatever job you do, the world is changing so fast, and it's probably mostly technology related, sure. But yeah, I mean, when I was young, like I said, growing up on a farm, my father expected, chores need to be done. So before you go play in the dirt pile, make sure your chores are done. Make sure your homework's done. So that goes back to the time management side of things. If I get the chores done, I'll have time to play in the dirt pile before I have to go and wash my hands for supper. But but my parents were also very supportive of my hobbies and my interest in terms of sports and if I wanted to go see my friends, my brother and I would have to ride 15 miles on a bike to go see our friends. That's how far away we lived from our friends. But it was all, get your chores done. They were what has to get done, but they were supportive in saying, okay, if you want to do this, you have to make time for it and plan it out and manage your time accordingly. Manage your expectations as well, right? Yep. That was the other thing.
And again, that's kind of my underlying tone in all this is manage your expectations. If you're trying to either make it big and trust me, there's thousands of people out there that you've never heard their name that make thousands of dollars on video game tournaments. And again, if you got any parents or if you're a kiddo, listen to this and you think you got what it takes, tell your parents, like, hey, I'm really interested in this. I want to take this to the next level. And, that's one of those, just like sports or, anything else like that. It's not, you can't get good without practice. And some people may see your practice as, well, you're just playing a game. But if you're serious about it, it's not a game. It's like, okay, this is going to be my life, because if you really boil it down, sports are nothing more than just a game,
Yeah.
What's the difference between
NHL players, NFL players, national, was it the baseball league? They're playing a game.
Again, to put this in perspective, what's the difference between kids in the backyard kicking a soccer ball and professional teams in a stadium full of 10,000 people? When you boil it down, there's no difference. They're doing the same thing. It's just somebody else is really good at it, and people just happen. And that's what we're seeing with gaming today. I think gaming will soon, it's not quite there, but it'll soon be on par with those, with mainstream sports.
I think you're right.
Again,
I think you're right.
The sport label can trigger people, make people, gaming's not a sport. You don't have to be athletic. Okay, competition then. You know what I mean? Look at golf, for example. Golf, I would argue, isn't a sport. It's a skill, just like gaming. And whenever you see people that play golf, and if you've played golf, I mean, obviously, RHINO, you're broken because of golf. We know that. So when you see a professional golfer play, again, that's one of those experiences where you're like, oh shit, that guy's good, Same thing with gaming. When you play a video game and then you see the professionals, you're like, damn, that's what it takes. So I think that gap is closing.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got billionaires buying actual video game sports teams because I think they see the writing on the walls. This is going to be the next big thing, Now, will a Warzone tournament ever be bigger than watching the Super Bowl? Probably not, but you never know, man. You never know.
But you've got more. You were talking about the 100 million
Mm-hmm.
people who play this game. Warzone. If that community solidified its ownership, so to speak, or solidified its membership a bit more, where anybody who is on Warzone automatically gets an invite to watch XYZ tournament, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be the crossover. That's literally going to be the crossover.
And I think as the older generations move on, and these younger generations start to get in those positions of entertainment, of the entertainment industry, and they're gonna realize, like, hey, man, there's a lot of people. I mean, some of these YouTube videos of these gamers have more views than the Super Bowl. More people have watched it than whatever sporting event, name it. It's probably got more views than that does, on a regular basis. And again, so going back to, I think, how gaming can actually unite the world. It's one of those things, because again, where I think it's unique is because there is no barrier to entry. Sports, you have to be athletic,
Yep.
you have to be good. Gaming, you don't. You can have those experiences that those professionals are, and so it just kind of unifies everybody who does it. And that's just it's a really unique thing. Anyway, Rhino and I have some games of Warzone to lose. We got to go visit the Gulag. Appreciate everybody's listening. If you have, any suggestions about what to talk about in the future, any games you want us to talk about, or even what your own thoughts and opinions are on gaming, what it means to you, let me know down in the comments below. Till next time, this is the Indoor Hunter, and I'll see you in the next one.